Last summer, the financial problems in the city of Bell gained national attention. My office looked at their books and found $6 million in unlawful taxes imposed on property owners, mismanagement of $50 million in bond funding, illegal contracting, and conflicts of interest surrounding the misuse of state and federal dollars. We also looked at Modoc County, where the county had illegally loaned over several years nearly $14 million in restricted state and federal funds to pay for county general fund activities. Modoc is currently trying to qualify for private borrowing linked to the sale and leaseback of county properties to pay back these loans. Since the uncovering of these financial problems, my office has been flooded with complaints that indicate we have only seen the tip of the iceberg. The financial integrity of local governments in California is at risk, and it is incumbent on the state of California to provide the independent oversight and a higher level of assistance to protect public funds by identifying and preventing problems that threaten the economic viability of cities, counties, and other local governments. I am sponsoring this package of bills authored by these legislators that will help ensure our local communities have both fiscal assistance from the state and oversight to prevent abuse. This legislation will accomplish the following. Number one, my office can only audit local agencies over the use of state and federal funds, but there is no authority to audit local taxes or bonds. Senator Kehoe's bill would allow my office the use of discretionary audits that could ensure compliance with local ordinances and state laws. Two, because local governments facing fiscal problems as severe as defaults may lead to an increase in the cost of borrowing and negatively reflect on the state itself, Senator Pavley is carrying legislation that would create a committee of fiscal experts that would provide advice and assistance to local agencies in need. Local governments hire their own independent certified public accountants to review their finances. When we looked at the quality of Bell's independent auditors, we saw and found just a little more than a rubber stamp. Because the public dollars deserve a higher level of responsibility to safeguard, Assemblymember Lara is authoring a bill to allow my office to review the work quality of more independent firms that contract with local governments. Modeled on the same oversight process currently in place for independent audits of school districts, this bill would allow my office to develop and issue audit guidelines for use by independent auditors of cities and counties, establish a list of acceptable independent auditors for local government audits, and limit the same auditor to 5 years with the same local agency in order to foster independence. While cities, counties, special districts, and redevelopment agencies are required to file annual financial transaction reports with my office, they also face small penalties for refusing to file or filing late. Assemblymember Alejo's bill would increase the penalties and require my office to audit those who fail to file these reports. Fifth, the last piece of legislation, authored by Assemblymember Cameron Smythe, would allow my office to prescribe the same accounting and reporting guidelines for cities that it currently does for county and special district financial reports. As Californians, we have a stake when it comes to the use of public funds. The reason why rules are attached to public dollars are to ensure that they are spent on the public programs that they are intended for. The current oversight design of the 58 counties, more than 480 cities, and nearly 5,000 special districts cannot adequately identify and investigate all the various issues that have led to the financial problems in places like Bell and Modoc. Local tax dollars are at risk, as are funds that are passed from state and federal government. The misuse of all these funds can lead to going concerns, the default, the loss of critical services, and increased costs to state and taxpayers. This is a comprehensive oversight measure for local government financial practices, which can help uncover problems before they threaten the financial viability of our communities. I also wanted to recognize Speaker Perez, who has made this a critical issue, and appreciate his leadership on this legislative front. I'd like to invite the outstanding state senator from San Diego, who will explain her bill.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Comptroller for inviting me here and joining my colleagues, Senator Fran Pavley and Assemblymember Smythe. The misconduct and fraud that occurred in the city of Bell was reprehensible, and regrettably, as the controller said, it is probably not an isolated event. In fact, Controller Chung reports that he continues to receive tips about alleged misconduct in other cities, counties, and special districts. Surprisingly, under current law, as he explained, the controller can only look into how state and federal funds are being spent, and only when there are allegations of misdeeds. He must wait for the aggrieved city to request an audit before he can examine how the funds are spent. In the case of Bell and perhaps in other jurisdictions, that probably occurs after the damage has been done. All of us were appalled with the waste of public money and the lack of personal ethics that were uncovered in the city of Bell. The public's faith in our government was shaken, and with good reason. In order to help restore the public trust and protect our hard-earned tax dollars, the controller must have greater authority to audit local government spending. That authority will provide the necessary transparency and oversight that the people of California deserve. SB 186 will give the controller greater authority to conduct audits to ensure that our local agencies are complying with their legal and fiduciary responsibilities. This will be done at no cost to the state. The audited agencies will be responsible for paying for the cost of the audits. And while the city of Bell involved only a handful of people, the repercussions were felt statewide. This bill will help the controller examine and expose information the public has a right to know, and I believe that SB 186 will be a valuable tool in those efforts. Thank you, Mr. Controller.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fran Pavley, representing Senate District 23 down in the Los Angeles, Ventura County areas. Thank you very much, Controller Chung, for including me in this package of bills, and I look forward to working with the other four authors and your office on this important measure. The scandal in Bell, as everyone said, has sort of sparked this outrage and severely eroded the public's confidence and trust, not only in local governments, but it permeates through all governments. The public now is concerned. Unfortunately, mismanagement or fraud or simply getting in over your head is not unique to Bell. Controller Chung mentioned his office's work with the county of Modoc, whose solvency today, and they're moving forward gradually, is the model outlined in the bill that I am authoring. My bill would give the Controller's Office the authority to conduct a preliminary review of local government books under certain conditions as established in the bill, and if warranted, then move forward to conduct a more thorough audit. The bill would also create a new entity, the Local Agency Financial Crisis Intervention Committee, putting together a group of experts led by Controller Chung with representatives from the Department of Finance, as well as other offices, including the Treasurer's Office, and having a consultant who's expert on municipal financing. The controller, after the committee gets involved, they would make recommendations to the local government, how to return to solvency and how to better manage their funds. After that, the controller would, on a yearly basis, provide an update to the legislature so we can review what is going on and the effectiveness in this new committee. California's credit ratings take a significant hit if local government goes into default. This makes borrowing and servicing our debt even more expensive and is a cost to all of us taxpayers. This bill would help prevent problems at the local level and allow the state to step in with a variety of resources to help keep the agency solvent. Providing oversight when warranted to our local governments is in all of our best interests. Again, I want to thank you for putting this package of bills together. It should definitely be of help to all people in California.
Well, thank you, Mr. Controller and Senators. I'm Assemblyman Cameron Smythe from the 38th District, also representing the counties of Los Angeles and Ventura, and I currently serve as the chair of the Assembly Local Government Committee. And the committee is going to see numerous bills that they're going to come through regarding that were sparked and initiated by the city of Bell that will tackle a whole variety of issues. And again, I want to echo my thanks to the controller for taking the lead on the fiscal issues. As certainly that is created the biggest concern and impact to the people of California. I'll be carrying AB 253, which would do two things. One, authorize the Comptroller's Office to prepare and issue accounting guidelines to cities. As you'll see, kind of a common theme is that the Comptroller's Office had limitations primarily to federal and state dollars, and so this would, again, another tool to allow the Comptroller to provide oversight and guidelines down to the local level. Also, it would authorize the creation of a committee on city accounting procedures, and again, this would be made up of the Comptroller's Office, representatives from city finance professionals, city managers, and city councils. And I think that that's important that you incorporate local officials as well, those who are on the front lines. And while we hear a lot about cities like Bell or Modoc County, there are still hundreds of local agencies that are doing it right and are leading, and they're being impacted by this as well. So it's good to have input from those cities and counties that are doing it right, and they can provide leadership. It's important to note that in this committee, it is no cost to the state. Once the committee is appointed, the meetings would only be reimbursed for the cost of travel, so it's not even a per diem committee, and the cost of travel would be borne by the cities that the representatives come from. So we're very sensitive to keeping the costs down to the state. So like I said, I appreciate having the opportunity to be a part of this team to help try to clean things up in some of our local jurisdictions, and I look forward to working with the Comptroller, the rest of the team, and several other legislators who will be running their own bills to try to provide better accountability and better stability for our local communities.
Thank you, Assemblymember Smythe, Senator Pavley, Senator Kehoe. Let me open it up if there are any questions. Tim?
John, much of what you're talking about, I mean, is oversight and whatever. But it seems to me that many of the problems with Bell were just outright fraud and potentially criminal activities. I mean, how does this? I understand on a grand scale how this might make some sense, but how does this really directly relate to Bell? I mean, if people want to hide things and behave fraudulently, how is this really going to address that?
It will enhance the state's ability with additional tools to attack the fundamental deficiencies and failings of some of the principal participants, such as that occurred in the Bell situation. So for instance, if you have consistent audit guidelines, if you have the ability to review the work product of the auditors to in fact check that they were fulfilling their professional responsibilities, we could have tackled this issue at perhaps some earlier date. The fact of the matter is that there is no independent check and balance if you have failure of action by local jurisdictions. Anybody else want to add?
John, somebody had said that you were looking into calls or tips that you've gotten. Is there anything else that you're looking into, or any ideas that some of these callers had or tipsters had?
Nanette, we have a number of referrals. Obviously, we'd like to fully engage in many of these tips. However, we don't have the resources. That's part of the reason for this package. The reason we were able to go into the city of Bell was that the interim city manager invited my office to come in and do a review. I shared with the interim city manager that my office would not partake in that review unless we had full and unrestricted access to the information. Because as pointed out, under current authority, we can only look at state and federal expenditures, and so that we couldn't do a full and comprehensive review. This will allow us to do so. And under Senator Kehoe's bill, we will be able to do so more proactively.
Have you worked with local governments at all in sort of crafting these bills? What sort of response are you expecting from them?
Yeah, we've engaged very actively. Obviously, they are the affected parties. They want to do right, so there's tremendous leadership in the organizations. They wanted to show that what took place in Bell was in fact an anomaly. So we will work with them. We wanted to make sure that we put into place the best practices. Fran, did you want to make a comment?
No, I just, as Assemblymember Smythe said, the majority of cities are functioning correctly, and what's happened in Bell and maybe a few other jurisdictions taints all cities with taxpayers suspecting that that kind of fraud and abuse could occur in their very own city. So I think independent audit under a variety of criteria and conditions as outlined in the bill that I'm carrying will allow that greater oversight, and I think it provides a lot of public perception of problems occurring in government in general, sort of a safety net that this will not happen again.
Can I just go back to the controller again, just and following back up on Tim's question, John? Just knowing what you know now about what happened in Bell, had you had these measures in place, would you have seen it earlier? Would you have been able to send up a red flag? Would someone, I mean, knowing the chain of events as you know them?
We may or may not have. It depends whether we would have received a tip in the city of Bell. However, as you read and you hear, there are instances where there's concern about the financial practices of municipalities throughout the state of California. So the question is, if this had happened earlier and people understood that this process was in fact in place, would somebody have shared that information with the controller's office or with a local elected official?
So this would still require you to act on someone else asking you to do something. This would not have you being proactive and saying every so often, I mean.
Well, it could have been triggered by something. So for instance, one of the aspects that we're going to have is that we're going to look at the practices of the accounting firms, the independent auditors. And as we do have in a different scenario, we can say based on failure to meet professional standards that this particular accounting firm is not allowed to do the independent audits, and for this case, for a city. Yeah.
You know, and to kind of piggyback on that, you know, there's also going to be other bills that are coming through our committee that deal with some of the, how do I put it, the shady practices that you saw at Bell as they were trying to circumvent some of the reporting requirements for their committee hearings and those things. So if we can tighten that up, then that will help the public become more aware of what's going on at their city, and then they can, you know, whether call their legislator or contact the controller, and then having this package of bills then gives the controller even greater authority to be able to move in. So there's kind of a two-track path that we're going with the controller's office, you know, kind of handling the fiscal aspects, but then other legislators are trying to tighten up some of the rules that have been circumvented by councils and commissioners.
And then back to the second question, as I'm not sure as Cameron mentioned it, I do have the appointing authority to put together a 10-person review committee that would include the city finance officials. So they will have direct participation in determining the audit standards.
Do you have any expectation how many cities would fall under these in a year, might face new audits or increased audits? Any expectation on that?
No. Thank you, Senator.
Controller, we have been listening in the last month, since last year, that the case of Bell could not be unique. Based on your investigation and the tips that you had received, could you say maybe this city could be in a similar situation or not?
Well, we can have lax financial practices taking place in other jurisdictions. Clearly, Bell was not the only city. We have other cities that are on the financial margin. We saw what happened with the city of Modoc. We have a city in the state of California that filed for bankruptcy, Vallejo. We have a city that is in technical default. So as we pursue this area with more rigor, we will identify these cities and try to, also with one of our package ideas, try to get them into a place where they're in much better financial condition for their residents.
But it sounds like still, though, that someone has to either tip you off or that the city has to come forward first and say, hey, we need help, or can you look at our books or whatever, before the auditor steps in. Is that still how it is? I mean...
Well, that will provide leads in many instances. However, as we continue to be more active in this field. Obviously, Bell highlighted the situation. There's going to be a lot more review of the practice. I think the local practices are going to come to light, and so that we don't necessarily need a lead in every instance.
John?
Did you have a follow-up
Well,
question?
just one real quick. She asked about support. Has the League of Cities, California cities, have they officially come out and said yes, we support the package of bills, or taken a position yet?
Well, we're going to continue to work with all the interested parties to try to get their support as much as possible.
Any thoughts on that congressional seat that opened up in Los Angeles? Will you be running for it, John?
Is that part of the bill package?
No, while it would be a phenomenal honor to represent the residents of that district in Washington, D.C., I absolutely love what I'm doing here, and I want to make sure that California gets out of its financial tumult. We have been in crisis for the last couple of years. This office has taken action to prevent the insolvency. We have a sustained path that we need to continue, and I think it would be irresponsible to leave this position.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you want to respond to
I didn't want to respond to that, but a previous one, if I may, because
Sorry.
one of the issues is who can trigger the preliminary audit, or preliminary review is what we call before we go into a third audit. Well, it could be from the local jurisdiction itself, but many times that wouldn't be the way to get at a problem if really fraud and mismanagement is the problem. So other criteria could also trigger an audit, whether it's inability to pay large bills. Someone could trigger that. An undisputed claim, for example, against the city, that could trigger that. A third party employees' inability to get paid over a certain period of time, that could trigger the preliminary review. And if evidence dictated that an audit was necessary, then it would go into the next step. So there are some circumstances that might help this mismanagement or fraud that might be occurring in some of the local jurisdictions.
Can I follow that up real quick? Is there any on the local level and like a whistleblower and status where someone could report something and I don't know, make it easier for them to come forward, or more incentive for them to come forward? And would you be open to including something like that in what you're doing?
We can look at it right now. Right now, there's no prohibition against people making recommendations. As Fran articulated very well, she indicated there's a number of various indicia by which we can also go into the city. If we see irresponsible financial practices taking place, that could trigger us going in and reviewing a city, in addition to the leads that we discussed earlier.